Hello guys, welcome to a new mixing tutorial. Let's take a look at the tones on my cover of Dispossesion. A Northlane classic very much requested on my channel. I didn't know why, but now after playing it, I see why people liked this vibe of Northlane, even though their new stuff is absolutely different. Very cool this. Turning off the master bus stuff to explain it at the end. Let's move on. Drums. This drum sound is my most recent drum sound, made with only the GGD Invasion kit, and you can find the mixing rundown for this tone in two covers back. So Nurture by Thornhill is where you're gonna find the rundown on this drum sound. It's a very cool one, very sharp kick and snare. Few favorites. The big news is the arrival of Arouser, this new compressor that I explained there what it does. It just compresses, but you can watch the full rundown of that drum sound on the Nurture mixing tutorial by Thornhill, so that I don't have to repeat all these 25 minutes of drum mixing for some of you that have already watched it. Bass. What a bass tone today. Very cool. We start with this DI. Pretty bad strings on the bass right now, pretty old, pretty honky. First thing was putting it into an amp, and I'm in love with the David Bendeth tone hub for bass tones. It has some awesome bass tones that are, well, very bassy, but also have cool grind that you need to pull out in the mix, and I'll show that. It didn't originally come like this. I opened Bendeth Bass 4, which had distortion. It's like one without, one with, one without, one with in terms of distortion on this back, but it's very light. Here's the distortion pedal that I use. It comes at like 8 and a treble at 5. And the amp settings don't have all this treble that I put on. So it's a good start, but can I Control C that? I can. I'm gonna jack up the treble and the gain. Yeah, now it's all about controlling it maybe. Let's see. I didn't like how pokey the attack was, so I put a little distortion before the amp so that it can saturate that attack. With FabFilter Saturn, where you can distort only certain frequencies of the signal, I chose a mid-range band between 900 and 5K and distort that. It's more strong, more consistent mid-range, instead of just the occasional poke, right? Then into a compressor. Very fond of the Arouser on bass as well. And why is that? Because if the slower attack really lets the pick attack of the bass go through the compressor and make it sound plenty aggressive, the compression I usually put on bass usually makes it sound a bit softer. Sure, it makes it sound louder, but it's like a softer bass. And here it makes it sound louder, but more aggressive too. It doesn't become louder because of the way I have it gain staged, so it becomes more consistent. That it does. And the pick attack pokes through. Very little EQ. Remove rumble beneath 50, remove a fizz above 8K. Then there's a notch, very annoying one here at 2.6. It's the and then I cut that, but I bring it back softly and with a low Q, so that I can bring up low end in a manner that doesn't accentuate that. High end, I mean, of course. Let's see guitar tone. Also not at all the best strings in the business. Messing with Tone Hub again. I went for the Atrium Audio Pack, which is one of my favorites for guitars because these boys, Carson and Grant, they've produced Polaris, August Burns Red, Rivers of Nihil, tons of bands that have epic guitar tone. Their guitar productions are some of my favorites. None of the album tones I went for. I went for some more open tones, open-handed. This one just said 5150 rhythm. I tried it out. Let's try to make sense of it. It's a 5150 rhythm, right? How hard can it be? Compression. Again, I'm trying to get that aggressiveness from the compressor, but I like it to be a little bit faster on guitar so that it reacts a little bit quicker, and it you can't do that on bass because it will kill a lot of low end. Not a lot, but a bit. And here I'm okay with killing low end. That's actually the purpose, to control some palm mutes and trugs. So just a constant 3 dB of gain reduction pins the guitar to the front. Yeah, so this EQ, as you can see, is just removing a little bit of that mid-range, which there's plenty of, and boosting some of the super highs that it's lacking. Rumble is at 70. Cut that. Fizz above 13K is useless as well. You can hear it become a little bit more hi-fi there. And trying to use Soothe as well today. This guitar tone has a lot of mid-range presence that EQing it out makes it sound stupid. So with Soothe, it's not a static EQ that you cut it out always. It just cuts it out when it's too loud. And interestingly enough, people use Soothe to take care of the harshness. The 2K to 4K, 5K stuff. I'm trying to use Soothe to take care of low-end bumps. Not low-end, but like 600, 500 mid-range bumps. So that the guitar tone maybe becomes a little bit more stable and constant. This is what it's taking out. There's harshness, but there's also a little bit of note signal. Just experimenting with that. Very happy. The intro, the eye. There's two things on it. My lo-fi secret weapon, which you guys know here on the Patreon, the Waves Kings microphones. If Waves is doing their crazy discounts, and this is one of the free plugins that they sometimes offer when you purchase 2 or more, you can click it, get it, and use it as a lo-fi. It's very good at that. And with some extra lo-fi EQing, I really get it on the spot. If it was just this EQ, I mean, removing basically all the low end, mid-range, a little high bump, still pretty hi-fi. But with the Kings mics, it's slower in volume, but it's also a cool EQ curve. Clean. Very good. This is just the guitar DI on split coil. Very fond of only using DI without amp sim on cleans these days. First things first, modulated reverb. Very long, 9 seconds and about a 40% mix on that, cutting some low end. Makes it stick. And a delay. The trick for the delay is to make it modulated as well so that it's chorusy, make it ping pong so that it's stereo spreads, and filter the high end out of it so that you don't hear individual repeats, you just hear the vibe of them. I'll turn it all the way up. into a compressor. I've explained that on cleans. I like to put the compressor at the end of the effects because you compress the effects together with the direct signal and it becomes one cohesive unit instead of like a direct signal with reverb around it. That's how I feel. EQ speaks for itself, really. Removing low end, boosting high end, basically a tilt EQ. It actually sounds better without it, but in the mix, we don't need the low end. We need the shininess. This guy, though, required some amp tone. So here's a random clean amp from the Bendeth pack as well, that I actually really dig on this. Just add some crunch to the pick attack on this lead. Actually, some heavy EQ here. Whoa, some boobies. Low end cut at 200 and a high end cut because of pick attack. Then I boosted the mid range to make sure the note was there. Being sent to the same effects that I explained before. That's it. These are the effects. There's my boom at the end. There's a reverse snare here. And there's a boom. There's a drop, obviously, at the final slowdown. How do we go about blowing this up in the master? Master bus, purpose of the master bus, gluing your stuff together, and then a limiter to make it loud. Here's the various stuffs I use to make my mix glue. Golfos is the first one. This is a plugin that if you run any material through it, it tries to take the best out of it in terms of human hearing perception. We like stuff that's a little bit scooped, that has a good bass, good high end. If you feed your mix through it, it's going to make some job of balancing the bass and kick and giving an almost constant shine in the high end. It sounds a bit more pro with it. Mix bus compression is here to make sure that I like to mix where the drums are louder than everything else because I mix into a compressor. Because when I put that kind of a mix into the compressor, what happens is that everything else, the drums are first to hit the wall and everything else goes back up to that, which means the drums will be pushing everything and making everything move. Let's see if you can hear that. It sounds like everything is louder, but it's not everything. It's everything but the drums. The drums are actually kind of at the same volume. But instead of turning everything up in the faders, which would drown the drums, you turn the whole mix up into a compressor, which makes the drums pump on top of everything. That's the idea. No transformer here. There's some coloring that you can do in this compressor, but this mix was so bass heavy because this bass tone is so boomy that I couldn't do any of these. I try to control that here. Multiband compressor is the same philosophy as this, but I get frequency control because there's 5 different frequency bands. So I pick the low end one and I try to smash it a little bit harder today. Make sure that at least every time the kick hits, there's a little bit of ducking there. And the super high end one because the cymbals are pretty bright. Another way I like to combat bright cymbals is this tape guy. Not only does it take a little bit of care of the brightness of the cymbals, but it makes the low end, instead of being very aggressive and direct, makes it a bit softer and louder. I liked it here. hopefully you can hear kind of a sub lift and quieter cymbals. And then limiter, very simple. I just run my mix through it, turn the threshold down until it starts crushing the drums. As soon as the drums peaks are chopped off, I know the mix is basically as loud as I should have it. You can see if kick and snare are not hitting, it shouldn't really be hitting the limiter too hard in my opinion. That is the mixing tutorial for today, guys. I hope you liked it, learned something. Feel free to leave comments down here on the Patreon page. And thank you for your support. I'll see you in the next one and take care.